Welcome to The Artist Remains, a channel where we explore creativity, consciousness, authenticity, and human connection in an age increasingly shaped by artificial intelligence. I'm artist and curator P.E. Pinkman. Today I'm going to introduce you to New Jersey-based artist and curator Beatrice Mady. She is a recipient of a Ford Foundation grant, a New Jersey State Council on the Arts grant, and 7 Kenya grants. Her first love is painting, but she has always been fascinated with the technical aspect of art and find making her images on the computer and with the camera very rewarding. Working on the computer allows for spontaneity and experimentation not possible with oil paint. Welcome, Beatrice. To start off, I wonder if you could spend a minute to introduce yourself to everybody and just talk about your work and how you characterize your practice as an artist today.
Sure. Well, thank you, Paul. I appreciate being invited to be part of this very beautiful podcast that you've got going. I am, as you said, a New Jersey artist now. I was born in New York City and spent my formative years on Long Island. I do consider myself an abstract painter who also makes digital art in Illustrator. Uh,
Cool.
I kind of liken this to Piet Mondrian, the founder, if you will, of Just Still, the idea of pure plasticism, but he also made drawings from nature and drawings of chrysanthemums. So that kind of split personality is present in other artists as well. My paintings are modernist in approach. I have no storyline. They're self-referential. They're about color, about form, about line, and it allows the viewer to have an individual response. In my digital work, because I incorporate my photographs, the work tends to be a little more narrative. I do still use my personal iconography in the digital pieces, but I think for the viewer, it's a little bit easier to find a storyline in that work.
Is there a storyline intentionally there? I've always been curious because it's true that, the painting, the pure painting, and then the mixed painting, mixed media works are different enough that you can perceive a storyline. You maybe, and I guess the question is, are you bringing one to it, or are you just leaving that to the viewer to decide?
I'm leaving it to the viewer to decide. I do work in series, both in my paintings and in the digital work. And the digital work before COVID was really based on my travel. So I would photograph a particular place and then use those photographs in the digital work, trying to bring the color and the sense of smell and texture into that digital piece. But it really was never about traveling to a particular place. So it was never about being in Peru or never about being in India or being in Japan. It was
Interesting.
always about the angle of something that I saw, the shadow, a texture, a pattern. It just so happened that they were all in one particular place.
It's so interesting to me because this conversation has come up before, and it's something that's always touched on my own experiences. This idea that you make a work based on a certain set of assumptions, that once a viewer sees it without reference to you, they get to basically recreate that piece based on their own set of assumptions. So here you have, I remember, and I could be, I think I'm right, at least one piece with pictures from along the Thames in London. And I thought immediately, here I go, right, as an audience, right? Here's a picture about London, or about the river. And yet what you're saying is fascinating and so interesting, both as an artist and as a viewer, that was me talking about the piece to myself versus what you were sort of putting into it.
Yeah. Yeah. I have taken a number of pictures of the Thames and, I'm thinking of one in particular of the banks, so it's very pebbly, and then there's this piece of metal, I guess it was a stairway leading down into the, uh, the river that was no longer functional, and, I really loved the way the colors of the rusting metal looked and
Yeah.
the angle, and so, really, it wasn't about the Thames, but, somebody looking at it would say, Oh, yeah, or, "Oh, look, there's the Eye in London," or, "There's the House of Parliament." So it's like but it wasn't ever really about any of those things. From my modernist position, because that's my formal training,
Right.
I I bring that to my digital art because I can't help myself, right? It's just embedded in me, it's ingrained in me to approach my art that way.
Can you talk about your training a little bit? I don't know that I know much about it.
Uh, well, the first art lessons that I took were at the Brooklyn Museum when I
Good
was in
place.
high school. Yeah, and, I was taking figure drawing, and I remember coming home with my sketch pad the first time and my mother taking a look at the drawings and was flabbergasted because she didn't realize that we were doing nude models. I'm like, "Mom, it's like a bowl of jello. It's all the same."
Yeah, right.
So
Funny.
I did study very classically. Even my college education, we were forced to do drawing. Forced. We were doing drawing all the time. We had to do a sketch pad a week, looking at nature. So my training was classical in that sense, although we were allowed to, explore and do things on our own. And I, of course, was very influenced by Helen Frankenthaler. So in my early days, even in high school, I would take the train to the Museum of Modern Art, and those were the days when Picasso's Guernica was still there.
I
I would,
remember, yes.
yeah, so I would be looking at the the Pollocks, the Krasners, and Helen Frankenthaler. So I think I was fortunate to have some female role models early on in my career,
That's good.
like Frankenthaler. Yeah. And then, when I went to graduate school, I continued in painting. Well, actually, in college, I minored in photography. So that was part of my technical love. I was always enamored with the idea of capturing an image and worked in the photo lab. I had a job as a color corrector during the summer, working in a
Wow.
photo studio. And then when I went to graduate school, I continued doing the staining, but was also very involved with gesture. And I felt like I needed to control the gesture. Kind of like Cezanne saying he needed to put a structure onto the transient quality of light of Impressionism. I
Right.
felt like I needed to put a structure into this poured gesture. So eventually I went to the grid. You can see the grid behind me. I'm
Right.
using the grid. So I felt like that gesture started to become imprisoned in the cells of each of the blocks of the grid.
So would you say you came, like you mentioned Mondrian earlier in our conversation, would you say you came to Mondrian after you sort of discovered the Abex painters, or was Mondrian always a piece of the equation and you just sort of brought that idea into the work? I mean, I know it's not the same, but the grid, really, he's sort of the master and, one of the beginnings of that, right?
Yeah, I think I was influenced by him very early on, along with the abstract expressionists and the second generation and the third generation abstract expressionists. So yeah, I think the grid has always played an important role. And his, idea of space and color, breaking things down to the bare essence. He used the primary colors of black and white and just geometric shapes, and was able to create so many variations, along with Josef Albers doing that
Right.
same
Yeah.
thing, the homage to the square, just, repeating that image over and over and over again and changing it each time.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. At what point did you bring computer work into your fine artwork? It sounds like they were sort of parallel for a while, and then, or was it right away? Did you start taking computer ideas and merging them with your own art?
Well, when I was in graduate school, the IBM was the personal computer, and it had no mouse. So in order to log in, you typed in this number, whatever code thing to get into a green screen. And I swore to myself and out loud that I would never, ever make art on the computer.
Oh, how funny.
Then a few years later, Steve Jobs came along with the Mac, and I was smitten. That was
There
it.
you
That
go.
was it. So I've been using Illustrator ever since the days when Illustrator could be installed on your computer on a floppy disk. So
So
I
that
just
it seems like a good place to jump into the AI conversation. Yeah. So just for my own understanding, do you work with AI at all? Have you interfaced with it just even in your personal life? I'm just kind of curious.
uh, in my personal life, I've used ChatGPT for a number of things.
Right.
I'll open up my refrigerator. I'll see I've got kale, I've got tofu, I've got onions. What the heck am I going to do with them? ChatGPT, how do I get a recipe for this? And it gives me a whole bunch of recipes. Okay, that's
Right?
great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just recently, I was with my sister and I said to her that I wanted to go to Norway. And she said, well, let's put it into ChatGPT and let's see what this says. So I told her, I want to go to this city, that city. I want to take a train. I want to spend this much money. Want to do this for that many days. And before her fingers left the keyboard, there was this list of everything.
Yeah,
And so I looked at it. And of course, for the next 4 days, I did my own research, on the trip. But
of course.
it's really good for organization, getting information instantly. So I've used it in that respect. In as much as AI is embedded into Illustrator and Photoshop now, I use it. Although I tend to push those prompts to the side. I don't ever type in, please put in a castle next to this thing and, ask it
Right,
to make
right,
a
right.
picture for me. But it's there, and it does things in the background even,
Right,
without me even wanting it to. It just does it. So I use it in that way. But just like saying I will never use the computer to make art, I will say I probably won't use AI in the future to make my art
right.
because in addition to being a modernist, I'm also a romantic. So, just a little background on what that means for me is that when I was about 4, there was a television program called Million Dollar Movie,
Oh, yeah.
and they played a movie. They aired it twice a day for a week. And the movie that really resonated with me was A Song to Remember. It was about the life of Frederick Chopin. Now, Chopin was driven, he was passionate about his art. And I think he was willing to die for his art. And that notion stuck with me. I mean, I haven't seen that movie since I was probably 6, but I can still see that one scene where Chopin is playing the piano at a concert, and then you see blood drip down on the keys. So
No,
he
yes.
loves this, and so he was still willing he was gonna die until or play until he died at the piano. So that kinda stuck with me. I didn't understand it fully when I was 4, but it it resonated with something really deep inside of me.
Mhm.
So that idea of passion, of inner truth, of self-expression is something that I don't think AI can ever replicate. And so I don't think that I will ever be using AI to make art. I think probably AI is a really good tool to help with workflow, Especially if you're a graphic artist. I mean, I remember back in the day when graphic artists did things with paste ups and mechanicals and, think, oh,
Right.
I'm not going to use the computer. It increased their workflow. It made things faster.
Sure.
InDesign doesn't make a great book. InDesign makes a great book faster to make because the designer input that into the program. So I don't think that AI can ever really do what I do. Uh, it's not human. It doesn't think. It's not self-referential. It's not self-aware.
Right.
So maybe at some point, if it does become that, I'll be so terrified that I won't want to use it. But
I mean, I think your points are really well taken, right? So the passion issue is really an important one. And I want to just touch on that because I think it's something that a lot of artists have in common, not all for sure. And in your
Mm,
case, it's an interesting combination because your own work makes reference to an artist, Mondrian, as we've talked about, whose work, some would argue, is dispassionate, right?
mm,
When it comes into your work, the idea of the grid and, putting a kind of geometric over your own work doesn't follow his in some very important ways in that you have the grid, you have the geometric aspects of it, but it's always connected to these very sometimes amorphous, sometimes very specific shapes.
mm.
And I wonder if you could talk about those, like this paisley shape. That's how I think of it anyway, that you've used again and again. So, are these shapes in your work related to something specific, to feelings or to ideas, or are they just shapes for the sake of shapes in the same way that a square is a square?
They're just shapes.
Interesting.
They really are just shapes. I do use that kind of form.
Hmm.
It's affectionately called the swan. It's actually from a pelican.
Ah,
So I first started using that shape shortly after my first trip to Italy, where I was looking at a lot of 14th century painting. And it is a shape found in religious painting in the 14th century. It's a symbol that goes back to ancient Rome. The pelican was seen as a passionate animal and a compassionate animal. And in Roman iconography, as in Christian iconography, the pelican is generally seen in a nest with babies, and the pelican pecks at itself to feed the babies. So that's kind of where the neck twists in on itself in my shape. So I know where the shape actually came from, but when I'm using it in my paintings, it doesn't represent any of those things. It's just a shape I like. It feels good drawing it. I like to use that curvilinear form in juxtaposition with the hard edge forms of the grid,
right.
and the same with the circle. I know where the circle came from, but it doesn't really mean anything in the paintings. My father was a chemical engineer and he was very analytic, but also incredibly visual. He could look at anything, figure out how it worked, and could fix anything. And he gave me his compasses that he used I guess he was taking some drafting classes or he had to, whatever he was doing in his chemical engineer classes, he had these things and he gave them to me. And so I started using the compass to draw those circles.
Uh,
And I used three of them because in my immediate family, there were three children, three siblings. I have two siblings and myself. So I generally use three of them, three circles in there. But
I don't know that you appreciate just how much you've revealed about the work, but it's really truly profound that these things are in there. So on the one hand, I did not know the specifics, but on the one hand, you can sense some of what you're talking about. And I think it's because of the juxtaposition of these two things, right? And this goes briefly back to our AI conversation, which is no one can know that what you're saying, what you've just told us, without having some insight into that. An
Mhm.
artificial intelligence could never invent something like that because they wouldn't think to do that way. But what
Right.
you've done is take really deeply meaningful shapes and apply them in a way that sort of erases, not erases, hides some of that meaning, but
Mhm.
by juxtaposing them against a grid very often, you essentially make them have the meaning anyway. And I'm going to explain that quickly. It's one thing when you see a strictly geometric painting, right? It's hard to find meaning in it at all other than its geometry. But the minute you apply to that geometric painting shapes that are more organic, suddenly there's a recognition, right? There's this contrast between this sort of alive shape and something that feels much more structural. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
And so by telling us this information, I think it makes it enriches the experience of seeing your work because of all of that depth that is perceptual but subtle now becomes like a place to go really spend time and start to look at that. So thank you for that. That's really fantastic. So you've been using computers and this has all been part of your process for a long time, and maybe or
Mhm.
maybe not AI comes into the equation. It seems to me like so much of what you create as an artist comes from a place of deep personal connection. Could you talk a little bit about what you think are the things that make a painting particularly poignant or successful in that regard? I know we've talked about a little bit, but so when you look at the work of other people, because you have a role as a curator, what is it
Mhm.
that you're looking for and how is it that you sense that?
Oh, well, I I do look for some connection. I look for kind of a conversation perhaps that I can have between the work and my own ideas of color and form and texture. When I pick work for a show, I don't necessarily only pick my style or abstraction. I try to show a wide range of things. In work that I'm curating, I try to look for the professional aspect of the artist. Are they able to speak to the viewer? Are they able to execute the work technically well? Uh, I don't know.
Are you
Yeah.
are you seeing people use artificial intelligence in work that you're being exposed to? Do you think or do you know? You know,
When I go to galleries,
yeah.
I do see work that is purely AI. I'm not sure that I really appreciate it. Just like I don't like Rococo art, I guess. It's like it's not my it's not my cup of tea.
Uh-huh.
I just think that AI is not the artist. I still think of AI as the tool
Right.
to
Which is,
create.
I think, the way to think about it. Right.
Just like, I've seen people post pictures that elephants have made with their trunk. Well, that's great, but do they have the understanding of what art is? It's not like giving a 3-year-old a box of crayons and a piece of paper and just allowing them to be creative because they can. That
Right.
naivete, something that artists strive to get back to their entire careers.
Right.
But the AI just can't create because it's just not self-aware. So
Yeah.
it doesn't have the ability to want to express itself.
Right. Boy, is that accurate.
Yeah,
It's
and
not expressing itself. It's expressing, or it's making whatever attempt it's making at expressing something that somebody else is telling it to, right?
yes, exactly. Yeah, AI can make something if it's prompted, but on its own, it can't do that.
Right.
And it can only do as much as a human can prompt it to do,
Right.
at
Right.
least so
Right.
far. I mean, maybe it will develop, as it seems to be developing so rapidly, its own consciousness. But now I don't see that.
Well, and it's always going to be an interesting question for me. I mean, this may sound kind of rude, but there are an awful lot of what we call conscious human beings out there who can't create anything. So, just AI having consciousness doesn't necessarily guarantee that it's going to be a good artist. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Right. I think you have to be conscious, you have to be self-aware, and I think that you need to have talent wherever
Right.
that comes from. Whether
Wherever
it
that comes from.
Yeah,
Yeah.
whether it's divine or innate or whatever, I think you have to have a certain skill set beyond what can be taught in order to make good art.
Right. So, with that, I'm going to say, let's talk a little bit about what's coming up for you, for your work. You're still curating. It's been a fascinating conversation, as always, as I expected it would be. And but give us an idea what's going on. What are you working on, and what's coming up?
Well, the Jersey City Studio Artist Studio Tour is going to be 36 years old in October,
Wow! Congrats.
and the Fine Art Gallery at St. Peter's University is going to be one of 5 official JCast sites. So, very soon, I think on Sunday, I will be looking at the work that was submitted to JCast and, picking work for the JCast show at the Fine Art Gallery.
Terrific.
Yeah, and then in November, I am going to be in a show at the IMUR Gallery in Jersey City. And there I will be showing some of the pieces that you see behind me, so my traditional oil paintings, and I will also be showing my digital work.
Great. That should be fantastic.
Yeah, so
Do
those
do
are
you see your newer work evolving in any particular way? I mean, I've watched it evolve over the years. I'm curious to see if you're experimenting with any new ideas or anything.
well, yes, I am, and I've started a series called the Sans series, SANS series, the
Okay.
Without series, because the last 6 paintings that I've made don't have the swan.
Really? Boy, that's a big transition.
Uh, I don't nobody's seen them yet. Well, no, that's not true. A
Uh-huh.
couple of people have seen them. I haven't put them in a show yet, and I'm not sure where they're going, but it is a radical departure for me.
I could see that. Boy, oh boy, I'm excited to see where it goes. Very cool. I mean, I know how challenging it is to put yourself in that position, but I also know how unbelievably exciting it can be because it's like discovering a new country, you know?
It is, and I think maybe one of the reasons I decided to eliminate that shape was because I took on the crazy notion of trying to inventory all of my work.
Something
So,
I'm familiar with.
yes, I know because you've just moved and you have unpacked and started
All
to,
right,
you know,
exactly.
put your studio together. So, by inventorying all my work, I've had to pull out absolutely everything. So, I've looked at work that I did in 1976 and, work that I did yesterday, and it's amazing for me to see some of the same color choices, some of the same shapes, some of the same issues, being worked out in slightly different ways. I've always been interested in the idea of duality, and, that's why I also separate my work with that black line that you see there.
Uh-huh.
And so I see that in my older work, and, seeing that work again just made me think a little bit differently about what I'm doing. And so I think that led me to, leave out the swan. Whether it's gonna be gone forever, I don't know, but
Right.
for now it is. Yeah.
Well, I have to say, as I said a little earlier, thank you for being so forthcoming about where your work comes from and how you've approached it, because I think that's as much as anything what this channel is about, because that is as much as anything what being an artist is about, you know? And we
Well,
do have a tendency, I think, as artists to keep a lot of those details hidden for a variety of reasons, all good, but it's so deeply informative and makes it a really strong connection for someone like me as a viewer to look at
uh,
your work knowing some of these things. So thank you and good luck with this change. We're all excited to see where it goes and looking forward to an opportunity. Hopefully at some point you'll have a chance to show some of those pieces for us to catch up with.
yes, well, thank you. You are, giving artists a chance to talk about their work, giving people an opportunity to see artists' work that they might not necessarily see because they're not in a particular area.
Yep.
And I think that it is so important to promote this idea because artists do work in isolation in their studio. Yes, we have
Right.
shows and see, what we do, but to be able to discuss the work with somebody who is also another artist who understands art and, where you're coming from is so important. And I really appreciate that, Paul. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of
You're
this.
you're most welcome. This has been great. Thank you again, and I look forward to seeing what you bring to the table in the near future. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.